It happened in November 1941 when a group of transport planes brought food to besieged Leningrad. After unloading and taking people on board, the planes flew back. In each airplane were specialists from Leningrad factories, children and women. There were 37 children and several adult passengers on board my car. The morning was frosty, and a thick fog hung over the airfield. For us it was the most suitable weather. If during the flight it will be the same, we can hope that we will not meet fascist fighters on the route. But the weather improved and the fog cleared. The clouds were now floating much higher. 9 of our planes were in a tight formation, and the distance between the planes was a few meters. On the order of the leader, I took the place of the trailing plane in the formation. It was hard to fly as a group in such a dense formation. All the time in tension, now and then add speed, reduce, then again add, and so the whole flight. The aircraft commander has no time to look around. All the attention is on the one flying ahead and on the leader. Even look at the instruments a glimpse. It's not easy for the leader either. He has to change speed every now and then, so that the group did not disintegrate. It is difficult and trailing, especially during the attack of Nazi fighters. The first strikes of the fascists tried to usually strike the flagship or the trailing. However, when attacking the flagship, the fascists themselves fell under fire of our entire group. But it was easier and safer for them to attack the trailing one, especially if the trailing one was even a little behind. That November day we walked in a dense formation, which was called wedge. A little aside and above, maneuvered 2 pairs of our cover fighters. Up to Lake Ladoga we were flying at an altitude of 150 meters. Fighters and dense clouds covered us from above. But when we approached the lake, the sky cleared and in some places opened up to the horizon. The weather is changing not in our favor, I thought, and began to look around cautiously. The Messerschmitts were about to come. Probably they are already circling somewhere nearby and waiting for us. We are flying at a strafing flight. Only in this way we can protect ourselves from their attack. Our huge machines, swaying slightly, float above the water. Just a few meters below us, the dark waves of the turbulent lake rise heavily. Swing the wing a little harder, and you will find yourself in the water. All crew members are in their seats, co-pilot next to him, air gunner at the top turret machine gun, flight engineer and flight mechanic at the side machine guns. The Messerschmitts could show up any second. Just I thought about it, as our car shook it earned a machine gun. By the strong shaking of the plane I feel that the gunner sends line after line from a large caliber machine gun. If he hits a fascist successfully, he won't come back. But where they are, I can't see. I look up and around, and I can feel bullets clattering on the airplane's skin. Then I see the fighters of the guard bravely rushing to meet the Messerschmitts diving from behind the clouds. And our formation at this time is closing even tighter so that we go wing to wing. Above us there is an air battle and our machine guns are not silent either. Suddenly a deafening explosion shakes the car. It's a shell hit the fuselage. The fascist is now shooting our plane from cannons. I can hear and feel our machine gunner firing at him. A real duel, but unequal. The fascist has 3 20mm guns and on board about 500 shells, and 2 machine guns with 500 rounds each. A sheaf of fire, his bullets drumming on the plating. And I feel a sense of anxiety for our passengers. I imagine the bullets piercing the fuselage, and I shudder at every machine gun burst. Poor guys, the Nazis will kill them, says the co-pilot, as if guessing my thoughts. I didn't know what was going on in the cabin, and even if I knew, I couldn't help anyway. All I could do was to continue to drive the plane despite the Nazi attack and try to save it, and thus save the children. That's what I thought in those difficult minutes of the flight. For a while the shooting stopped. Messerschmitts again went to altitude and are about to dive. Our airplane is damaged and I can feel it well. Now the flight has become especially dangerous, because under us in a few meters lake. I'm lowering the plane even lower. At low altitude the enemy can't reach us, they have too much speed. The slightest miscalculation can cost a fascist his life. A new shell hit shakes our airplane, something with one engine, it drops oil pressure. Just then, a flight mechanic comes into the cockpit and reports about the punctured gas tanks, from which gasoline is leaking out. It's even worse in the cabin, there are dead and wounded. My heart squeezed, a lump came to my throat. Having mastered myself, I told him to go to the cabin and help the children, try not to panic. But there was no panic, the kids were the best. In a word, they were Leningraders. After the flight, I was told that when some children were wounded, the flight engineer grabbed the first aid kit and rushed to them. And the kids said to him, "Uncle Pilot, go to the machine gun and beat the fascists. We will bandage each other ourselves, just give us bandages." What only these kids have not suffered in Leningrad: hunger, cold, artillery shelling and bombing, blood, death of loved ones, and now here again, blood, pain and death. They are holding on, showing not childish courage. How much one has to live through to perceive the horrors of war in such an adult way. I do not know whether all the crew members understood at that moment our critical situation, but the plane was flying, although it began to lag behind. We're still flying at a drift. The eastern shore is about to appear. I'm squeezing the last strength out of the engines, trying to keep the interval. German fighters again pounce on our trailing damaged plane, trying to cut it off from the group. They take turns dive bombing. We fight back as best we can. It's raining tracer machine gun bursts all around. Again the bullets drummed on the plane. Anxiety for our little passengers grips my heart again. I know that the duro fuselage will not save them from bullets and shells, that's why I shudder from every shake of the airplane. A little calms down a sharp hard knocking of our machine gun. But here the machine shuddered again, and he fell silent. Then I was told that one of the machine gun bursts, the gunner was wounded, and his machine gun and turret were damaged. In addition, a fire broke out on the machine gun turret. Bleeding, he with the help of his jacket and helmet managed to extinguish it, rushed to the side and together with the flight engineer opened fire on the Messerschmitts. Our situation with every minute became more and more difficult. We again began to lag behind the group. At strong gusts of wind the airplane was sharply thrown sideways. In order to maintain transverse stability, I periodically added revolutions of the left engine, and when stability is restored I again reduced. But our airplane continued to lag behind. This was reported to the leader, he sharply reduced speed. The others reduced speed and we caught up with the group. We were given a command to take a place in the middle of the formation and began to pass forward. While we carried out this maneuver, one of the Messerschmitts again managed to break through to the group and attack. The whole group unleashed such a barrage of fire on it that the Messerschmitt, having time to make 2 or 3 shots from the guns, caught fire and in a second or two collapsed into the lake. And yet one of its shells hit our machine. It went through the center of the fuselage, hit the radio half compass and turned the instrument panel. Our wounded airplane flew slowly on one engine, the second worked mostly only at low speeds. But we were under the reliable protection of our comrades. Lataga was past, now it was not far to the airfield. And how I landed my airplane then, it is terrible to remember. The rudders were literally held on strings. The landing gear wouldn't release. One engine didn't work at all, I had to turn it off by the end of the flight. The second one turned itself off before landing. There wasn't a drop of gasoline left in the tanks. It leaked out of the holes punched by bullets. It is our luck that the airplane did not catch fire and did not explode. All it took was one spark. We were lucky that the weather was cold, besides, the gasoline poured out of the holes in a stream, not splashed. That must have saved us from fire and explosion. After landing, I struggled to get up from the pilot's seat. I went out into the cabin. My legs wouldn't listen. Exhausted children and other passengers also stirred, but there was no talking, no moans, no complaints. From gasoline vapors there was nothing to breathe in the plane. I ordered everyone to come out immediately for air, and I myself, having gathered my strength, began to help carry and take out of the airplane wounded children. Only then I noticed that an elderly man with a blonde girl in his arms was sitting on a bench in the airplane. A blue cap with a pink ribbon was lying on the floor. I went up to him and saw that on the girl's temple there was a wound, and the man seemed petrified. He kept holding the girl to his chest. I was breathless at the sight. I tried to help the man up. But he, apparently, had not yet realized what had happened and kept pressing the girl to his chest. When I approached him and spoke to him, he suddenly shuddered and, as if waking up, looked at the lifeless face of the girl, shrieked and lost consciousness.